Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Essential Libertarians, giving you the tools for self-governance. I'm your host, Kareem Mays, and I'm joined by the one and only matovcik of Liberty and Health, teaching you how to be healthy and also how to be free, because you can't really do one without the other, right?
Yeah, you got it, man.
Yeah. Can't be healthy if you're not free, and you can't be free if you're not healthy. Check him out right here, Kyle Matovcik. He has interviewed people like Maj Touré. One other one I really like is Ian Smith, Reed Coverdale, and all the big names actually in the thing, except for like Ron Paul and probably Michael Heiss. I would say you got everybody. Ron Paul,
Mike's in there. It was more
Mike's in there.
recent. Yeah.
Okay. So hey, just got to get Ron Paul and David Smith, and you've got the whole collection. Also, check out my friend Jeremiah. Insanity is free. You can check him out at his Twitter, jeremiah.exe. He is a hedgehog, and I like a lot of his stuff here. He's an all-around anarchist, I guess you could say. So he studies all schools, and that's why I really like it, because as much as I like anarcho-capitalism, I think there's more to learn about the other sides, like figuring out what the heck syndicalism is, primitivism. Not everybody, unfortunately, is going to be an ANCAP. All right, guys, let us get into the first story. I like this one, and I wanted to cover it because conservatives are going to say that Biden's weak. Trump would have handled this better. We're on We Are Change, looking at Biden and Saudis accuse each other of lying after Arab summit ends without major oil production deal. There was a funny meme that said, like, hey, what can you do for me? Like the pawn shop dealers. And he said, all we can do is lower your approval rating if it isn't low enough. So President Brandon's trip, having ended as a nothing burger with no immediate deliverables on oil production, has already descended into a he said, she said back and forth. Biden told press he had raised the issue of Jamal Khashoggi's murder, which actually is better than the last guy. Not that much, but he didn't sweep it under the rug, even accusing him directly, which he did do. I have 100%. Like, you know, you can fact check me 100%. He did do it. Trump tried to like, oh, he didn't do anything. I'm like, come on. Dude.
Yeah, well, to me, it's like 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. You can sweep Khashoggi under the rug while still being a shill for the military-industrial complex and literally sweeping Nazi funding under the rug. Like, Biden wrote the Patriot Act that treats journalists exactly like Khashoggi got treated, so I don't fucking care about the distinction. Personally, also, Biden ran cover for C-14, Right Sector Svoboda, and Azov Battalion in Ukraine during the Euromaidan coup that they helped, like, fucking do. So, like, ultimately, Biden isn't that much better in that regard, if any at all. And I think he's probably worse. But being worse than Trump shouldn't be the bar. So
I agree. No, I'm just saying on this particular issue, like, is Biden objectively worse? Yeah. But here's the thing. I take like issues individually, which most people don't do. Like, people are very, to me, one-sided. Like, oh my God, you quoted Stalin. I'm like, yeah, I'm still an ANCAP. They're like, oh, like they have a mental breakdown. Like, how could you say you liked this quote from somebody? I'm like, well, I can like an individual action of a person, and that person can still be worse than however many people else. So he raised the murder of Khashoggi, indicated he thought he was not personally responsible for it, and he took actions against who were responsible, which he's lying. He proceeded to say, hoping inflation will go down. I didn't hear the particular phrase. Al Juber told Fox News. And President Brandon touched down in D.C. after midnight on Sunday, which shouldn't exist anymore. He said the Saudi Arabian foreign minister, who denied ever hearing Biden confront Mohammed bin Salman about Khashoggi's murder, was wrong. Early on Sunday, he disputed an account. He did not accuse the Crown, murder Washington Post, during a private meeting with the nation's de facto leader on Friday. And actually here we can look, this is one of the many claims Saudi made at the conclusion of Biden's trip, dampening the White House, touting incremental progress on two key objectives, normalizing relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia and bolstering security. I don't know if that's going to happen. What I find interesting, the most interesting in this article is you cannot impose your values by force. The Crown Prince was clear with Biden, and we have our own values that are not going to align 100%. Talk about something that matters. So I'm going to get off of this, but I have a few things to say here. Kyle, did I get you back?
Yeah. I'm sorry about that. Sometimes my internet can be a little crappy.
Hey, it's okay. It works better than the government.
Yeah.
Which I guess that means it works at all. So I have multiple things to say about this. One, Joe Biden actually said, hey, he was going to call them a pariah, call them out, which do politicians ever follow on their promises? No, not really, except Ron Paul, maybe Rand Paul here and there. So he didn't even follow up on that. Two, I would say in Pennsylvania, right here, right where we're at, we have oil reserves. As far as I'm concerned, we should tap into those. Tell the environmentalists to say, I'm sorry, we're going to tap into our own oil. Gas does not have to be that expensive. And it's just kind of crazy to me because even as bad as the Democrats are, even as much as I don't like them, the only bill I ever called people for, I think including you, Kyle, was the Ro Khanna's bill on Yemen, which I think is a huge deal because as bad as we have it here, even during lockdown, it's still nowhere near as bad as something like in Yemen. So bringing attention to that, I think, is important. And he didn't even bring that up. Like, okay, can we at least get a truce, which I think they're in the process of doing, which is good. But I have a ton of stuff to say on this more, but I think the main points were even beyond Jamal Khashoggi. It's good he brought that up, but he also sucks. He didn't bring up Yemen, and he's not trying to push for domestic oil production because that wouldn't help the Great Reset. So that's my opinion on this.
See, but here's the thing. First off, Biden is a massive piece of shit and a liar. And he, first off, like, let's just talk about for a second, as an example, civil rights.
Okay.
We have a black vice president, a black woman vice president. She checks boxes, right? But she was responsible for locking up the kids of, like, truant kids of poor parents, and their parents as well. So she called herself top cop and laughed about destroying poor people's lives, and that's emblematic. You know, he chose her. Or in my personal, like, conspiratarian sort of, like, you know, mentality, she was chosen by the elites, and so was he. And Biden specifically was responsible for the crime bill that disproportionately targeted black people, which might be why Mike Bloomberg liked him so much, because Mike Bloomberg was the guy who said, you know, throw them against a wall, and talking about minorities and going into communities where minorities are and throwing them against the wall because that's where the guns and drugs are. That's a Mike Bloomberg quote. And he's massively wealthy. He makes Trump look poor. So the Mike Bloomberg industrial complex, where he funds a politician, that should be suspect to anyone who cares about civil liberties, who cares about stopping war, who cares about stopping police brutality, and who cares about civil rights. So Biden, like, you know, fucked civil rights with that crime bill. And now he's considering softening it because Hunter gets capped for crack. Because Hunter is doing all these crimes, because Hunter had his iPhone compromised, because Hunter and his stupid cracked out fucking gourd decided that this was a good idea to store all this incriminating evidence in a fucking cloud backup. You know, because of that, because of all these little things coming out, first the media did damage control, then politicians started to be like, well, maybe we can soften it now and be a little bit nicer. But only after the prison industrial complex forced crack addicts to make your license plates to track civilians by. You know, like, it's a really big indicator of how progressive somebody actually is, how reasonable somebody actually is, and how good for liberty somebody is, whether or not they're consistent in one area of a similar type. You know, so Biden can call out Khashoggi now that it's a really far fucking time away from it. Why didn't he do that day one? And if he cares about war crimes and stopping war crimes, why the fuck is Julian Assange still getting extradited? There is zero reason for that if he actually cares about journalism. He doesn't give a fuck. Khashoggi is already dead. It's a mindless virtue signal that everybody will lap up.
Yeah, and, you know, to his point, it's absolutely funny, and it's something that we should really pay attention to. It's easy to kind of react when you're so far away from the actual consequential point, or when something actually happens and you have to face the consequences for it, that it doesn't matter, right? So being able to react months and months down the line, it's ultimately unimportant. You need to be outspoken and principled in the moment, right? Because that's always going to be when it matters. To kind of touch on some of the war stuff and Biden's failings there, he promised to end the war in Yemen back when he was campaigning as president, and
He did, though, didn't he?
He did.
Well, they said they would end offensive support, but what that actually ultimately turned into, they actually had the deadliest month of all. I believe it was the beginning of this year or the beginning of last year. That was actually the deadliest month in the entire war in Yemen. So clearly the whatever offensive support we were giving them clearly wasn't doing very much. Either that, or it was just kind of a waving of the hands to kind of tell people like, look, we're doing something, but we ultimately didn't do anything. And to kind of tap onto the point of tapping into oil reserves, when it comes to fracking, I'm very, very pro fracking, and I've actually done research papers on this throughout my time when I was in college and when I was in high school. Even there's so many technologies around fracking that make it safe for us. And as Kareem and I are here in southwestern Pennsylvania, we're part of what's called the Marcellus Shale Bed, which is basically a shale bed that lays underneath a lot of the I think it's the northeastern part of America, and there's a lot of oil stuck underneath it that you would just have to frack to get to. So by tapping into those resources, you could definitely make gas more freely and cheaply and readily available to people,
and develop sinkholes.
Right. Well, there's so many different benefits to it.
You know what else you could do? You could actually end both wars. You know how? You start tapping into the gas, and you say, "Fine, I'm going to sell this to cut." Parts of America, and then you cut off Saudi Arabia, and then you say, "Hey, Europe, I want to pay Pennsylvania's debt. I don't care about Putin. I will sell you this gas." That's literally what I'd do. Like if the federal government was out of the way, which they're kind of useless anyway, get them out of the way and start selling gas to the rest of Europe. Start selling it. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not saying global warming doesn't exist, but to me, if you go look at George Carlin's rant on Earth Day, I think he's spot on where these environmentalists don't care about the planet in the abstract. They care about their own environment being nice. That's why they take G Summit, things, and they get on a fancy private plane for like 20 people. They have mansions and all that stuff. So I think the feasible way to fix gas, fix the economy, fix a lot of problems is simply to tap into our reserves here, which is why I'm, going really hard. I'm going to try and run for the 59th just so I can convince the Republicans that, hey, please, if you do nothing else, and I don't agree with you philosophically, but if you do nothing else, and I do agree with them on some things, like guns and things like that, but if you do nothing else, let's tap into our reserves. And by doing that, I think we can solve a lot of these problems. Hopefully, we can stop, a couple wars. If
Republicans and the NRA do not give a fuck about guns. They have been hugely responsible for many gun control measures. Reagan, Nixon, fucking the NRA specifically. They're all like trying to grab your guns. Trump literally said that he likes to take the guns first and go through due process later.
Yes.
So Republicans suck asshole on guns. But let's be specific with this. The solution, and this is the real root of it, it's not that they like their environment to be good. It's that they don't want you in it. They don't like poor people. So they are totally fine with being a part of the problem as long as they get to look good, as long as they get power, and as long as they can use that signal to ascend to power. If they really cared about the environment, they'd be a lot less Hillary Clinton and a lot more Ted Kaye. We're talking people who have historically supported any major lobby that was terrible for the environment as long as it benefited their bottom line. Big oil is huge with Democrats, and you're not going to see most Democratic candidates take say no to Shell or ExxonMobil or BP. if they say, here, have a couple $1 million to run campaign ads in Pennsylvania, they're not going to say no. And right now, Democrats are literally funding Republican candidates who they think are zany enough to not get play, because that's their strategy. And if you look at it as a surface level, you know, that maybe they're just really stupid and they don't think this will work this time, even though it worked with Trump, that's already bad enough. But if you think of it in terms of a partyarchist duopoly, like, you know, Samuel Konkin did of agorist fame, like, this could just be a big, you know, club and you ain't in it. And they could just be like, hey, let's fund our guy because we need a boogeyman for a bit. Hey, go be our bad guy for a bit. We totally hate you. Man, shit, fuck, what's wrong with my eye? You know, that's what it really is. It's not anything legit from either side. They both pay lip service to opposing the other and then do the exact same thing. You want to talk Biden and fucking Yemen, like Biden and Khashoggi, like there's a gruesome murder like Khashoggi every day in Yemen, and that's one of the reasons he said soften support for like Saudi Arabia, hold them accountable, and then like he says, oh, you know what? Gosh darn it, Russia's a genocidal country. We need to take a hard moral stance here and go with Saudi Arabia. That'll so he's a fucking liar and you know, a megalomaniacal, dementia-riddled hypocrite. And so is anybody else that's going to get in, because that's what the duopoly likes. They like their old money, old blood in the office, and they don't like young people with new ideas, because those young people with new ideas haven't had time to get massively corrupted by the machine and have nothing to lose.
Yes, they haven't indoctrinated Dave Smith yet, but he is part of the problem, literally. But yeah, no, I agree with you. As far as I'm concerned, like even when I show this side, I'm like, hey, look, Biden with Klaus Schwab. They're like, no, Democrats and liberals don't want to see that. He doesn't know what he's doing. Oh, here, look, here's Trump with Klaus Schwab. Oh no, that can't be true. That would break my, you know, Q narrative in the deep state, and then I have to, you know, redo all my mythology, and that would make me sad. And,
yeah, I call those people Q-tards.
Yeah, I do. I've called them worse because they called me a Hillary Clinton supporter, which I find offensive. That is offensive. You don't insult someone like that. But get your thoughts on this. A lot of people have always said, you know, Fauci, he should retire, whatever, which I completely agree. In fact, I agree with Rand Paul. Just get rid of the department. Personally, I say defund Whiskey Hotel. But if you're going to do it piece by piece, that's fine too. I found this one interesting. Just today, he plans to retire by the end of U.S. Biden's term. Now, he's like already 80 or whatever. So
81.
80, yeah. So, I mean, it was going to happen eventually. Like, it's kind of getting like ridiculous. Like, to me, if I'm that age, I'm like, okay, I'm going to, I don't know, go on the beach, enjoy golf, something. So, Fauci, the chief medical advisor to the White House, confirmed he will retire by the end of Joe Biden's first term, but it could come much earlier than that. The infectious disease expert, if you want to call him that, told Reuters in an interview Monday, I haven't made an announcement of my retirement, but could be anywhere from now until then. Fauci said in the telephone interview, I don't know yet. Fauci, 81, you're right, Jeremy, in November 2021, told Reuters it's not even remotely contemplating retirement. I don't know.
So here's the thing. What I posted to Twitter about this, and like obviously I'll shut up and let Kyle talk here shortly, but like my comments on Twitter basically sum it up that he's 81 is trending because a guy who did research by torturing dogs helped spread homophobic HIV lies, helped fund and cover up Wuhan viral research, lied about mask necessity, and persistently assisted elites in profit and power transfer, might retire. Not soon enough. The best part is that since lying at the behest of the establishment will always be acceptable to the establishment, even if for some reason Anthony Fauci saw legal trouble over any of his lies and corruption, he would probably get a presidential pardon from Biden. That's life.
Yeah. Yeah, you ain't kidding. There was a tweet that came out today, and I quote tweeted it. They tweeted out hashtag COVID-19 has hit my kid. We vaccinated, mask, ate outside, yet I hate people who downplayed mask and continue to push misinformation. The disappointment on his face as we cancel long-made plans is devastating. Hashtag COVID is not over. Hashtag Tweety attrition and hashtag parroting. When it comes to these kind of people, I want to get angry with them and I want to just slap the living shit out of them. But this isn't necessarily their doing. This is because you had somebody like Dr. Fauci who consistently lied and told people things that eventually, and most of them actually right off the bat, were objectively false. We were told forever that the jabs were going to keep you from getting COVID. Okay, well, we found out that wasn't true. You can't spread it if you get the jab. Well, we found out that wasn't true.
Yeah.
You need to lock yourself in your home to not spread COVID. Well, we found out that if you look graph by graph, county by county, that never came true. And then he also told you that, 2 weeks to slow the spread, and also asymptomatic spread. You're an asymptomatic carrier. Well, if you look at a study that came out of the University of East Anglia, I want to say in late 2020, they contact traced, I think it was either 10 million or like 100. I can't remember. It was a lot of people, though.
Mm-hmm.
And what they found is that I think it was less than 120 people spread COVID asymptomatically. Jay Bhattacharya himself had said that symptomatic spread with COVID was 17 out of every 1,000 cases spread within a household. Asymptomatic was 7 out of 1,000 cases spread within a household. So just as you kind of dig deeper and deeper on any kind of literature regarding COVID, you just find that Fauci's a complete total fraud. So he should absolutely be in prison for everything that he's done to the American people and kind of putting people into this stage of just constantly being gaslit. Because what do you hear all the time? If you got COVID, then you just didn't follow the mandates and the decrees and everything else hard enough, right? You didn't lock down hard enough. You didn't wear a mask. You weren't triple vaccinated. It's such a gaslighting technique and it's so disgusting. And an 80-year-old one man who's consistently been proving to be objectively wrong should no longer hold public office. I think Dave Smith said on one of his recent podcasts, he should just walk around with a bag on his head for the rest of his life. And I think that's going a little bit too easy, but I would settle for it.
Okay, yeah, no, bag. But my problem's even this. Like, okay, he retired. Let's say he retired today. One, he's done a lot of crimes and he should be completely, as far as I'm concerned, incarcerated, and worse with his buddy who invented this crappy Xbox that takes an hour to download a game. Modern gaming is terrible. That being said, the problem I think inherently is that the NIH has so much power that one person is deciding policy. One person is the spokesperson for 330 million people. Like, even Kyle, we had this discussion. You say like, these biohackers, I think we were talking about, this guy or that guy, say like this method's weird or that. Okay, fine. Like, we have like discrepancies on that, but he's not influencing 330 million people on cameras. Like, it's not highly centralized. So me and a few people who have this opinion on health can do this. Some people who have more conventional ideas can do this. I come to the idea that I used to have the notion that, my views on health, are the only ones that you have to do it completely naturopathically. It has to be all natural. But I figure some people are just not going to do that. They don't want that. They're like, I want a pill. This is how I want to run things. Okay, fine. But you're going to have, specific doctors recommending this thing and that thing, which is okay. I don't have an issue with that. What I have an issue with is you say like one person decides everything for 330 million people. And I actually asked a pharmacy student, I said, well, here's my problem. Like, these things, the CDC directs everybody who's working. Like, everybody has to follow this. What would happen if you just got rid of the NIH, the FDA, and the CDC? He's like, I don't know if you could do that, Kareem. I'm like, well, why not? It's possible. You just cut the funding. He's like, yeah, but people wouldn't know what to do. I'm like, what do you mean people wouldn't know what to do? Like, there's literally people out there just who are looking, like, tell me where to walk, how long, how much, how far. And they need that FDA, like FDA, tell me what to do in my health. And CDC, tell me what to do in my life. They always want a central institution. Tell me how to do this. Tell me how to do this. So even if you replace one guy who was terrible, should be in jail, My problem is that you have a highly centralized system. Until you get rid of that, it's like the ring of power. It's always going to corrupt, and you're always going to get someone who says, "Oh, I can decide everything for people." Like, to be fair, they put me in that position. Like, Green, you dictate health policy for 330 million people. Even being an ANCAP, part of me is like, man, I really don't like vaping. Like, there's always dudes like, even some of my friends are like blowing like strawberry, and at first I'm like, fine, this smells pretty good, but then like people are just clouds here and there. And for some reason, I guess they're like, it's not cigarette smoke. Hey, it smells like a banana. Isn't that cool? Part of me would be like, man, I want to ban this stuff. This annoys me like to no end because they think it's trendy and cool. And then even I had coworkers who were like disassembling it, like, check this out, I got this car. I'm like, so pay attention. Like, you make fun of me because I make meme jokes during work, which, I work there, but I used to, memes and funny stuff. But you guys are like okay with disassembling and talking about your vapes and trading juices. So that kind of got like a pet peeve thing where I'm like, I don't like this. Now, if I had that kind of power, part of me would be like, I wouldn't do it, but part of me would really be tempted to say, hey, nobody should ever vape again, like banning this. Nobody should ever smoke again. I don't like cigarette smoke and things like that. I know those two things harmful. They completely are, but I shouldn't be able to dictate that policy for that many people. And even I know I'm super pro-liberty, but there's times when things get me frustrated or I want to do things. And you get someone who's malevolent and you get this result. They're just going to flip-flop. What? This mask, this, a medical procedure establishment. And they're just going to ride you around in a circle because they know they can. And I can understand that people go, oh, wow, that's an intoxicating amount of power. Like, I can decide, my decisions affect almost everybody in the United States. It's insane. So whether he or not, just get rid of the departments.
Or these things aren't just done by one person, and that's part of the centralization problem, is that people pick one figurehead to blame. But like, really, the FDA is a revolving door with the mega corporations and the banking industry and the media, etc. Like, and the media is funded by big pharma, and like the big pharma does the revolving door with the regulatory board so that they get more funding to fund the media. It's a vicious cycle. And then government forces these things because there's been a public acceptance campaign and official sources decided that's how it was. And all of these things turn into a vicious cycle of like corruption and profit and power transfers from the profit and like corruption and power and profit transfers from the essentially proletariat to the state capitalist class. Like, the ultimate thing there is that when you end up with like people like Fauci, I did a video on my channel saying similar things called Fauci is not the final boss. And it's about how Fauci isn't the guy who did all this stuff. He's just a guy that they put in front of a camera to talk about this stuff. It's sort of like how Elon Musk doesn't work at his factories, really. Like, his job is more to be a spokesperson for it, which is why, he has time to go do things like smoke weed on Joe Rogan while his employees are threatened with bankruptcy of the entire company if they don't come back in and work on Thanksgiving holiday. So, when you end up with somebody like Fauci, he's a rock star. They've got Funko Pops and like, merch and saintly images of him with halo light looking thing bullshit behind him and like literal stained glass pictures and all this fucking bullshit. They've turned him into a saint, but also a martyr. Because if he goes down, everybody's going to be like slobbing his knob forever, and you won't be able to criticize him at all for at least 10 years. So like, the whole thing is that like they've created this monolithic person, but he's not
personality, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's not like he's not the system. He's the figurehead for the system. He's the guy who pulls some strings, but ultimately the strings are still being pulled by those in charge. Like, The Economist magazine had a really good picture once of like I think it was exactly 2 years ago actually, of this big hand coming down from the sky, and that hand coming like with a leash to a doctor, and that doctor having a leash to a dog, and you're the dog. You're the dog. So they know that they're telling you that they're conveying and communicating that idea, and then you're just supposed to sit there and take it, not because Fauci said so, but because the powers that be had instilled enough cyclical corruption that getting people like Fauci out, as long as these institutions are there, isn't possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the final boss is a shape-shifting lizard person at the Rothschild house.
Well, part of the whole deal with the COVID regime is, we would say it, is that there is a culture kind of around it. And even a lot of the right wingers have kind of come to adopt this, where it's, oh, if you have COVID, you need to stay away from me, you need to stay home, right? That's like the instant reaction from everybody, right? And even people who are somewhat liberty minded, this is the gut reaction. You need to stay home, you need to stay away from me. And I'm not saying to go out and cough on people, but like, look, if you just got the sniffles, the data is perfectly clear. The less sick you are, the less likely you are to spread COVID, almost like every other cold on the face of the planet, right? So, and what happens every single time? I think we were talking about this off air. Whenever you have a sniffle or you feel any kind of thing, what is it? Oh, you got COVID. You need to go get tested. Like, It's a cold. At some point, we need to just start calling it a cold and stop adopting this idea and this culture of this COVID fear. And obviously the left is just absolutely insane with it, because they're the ones that want you to get vaccinated and vaccinate your 5-year-old. And
disagree, but go on.
Okay, yeah, we can get into it a little bit, but all this stuff wouldn't necessarily be able to continue if there wasn't just the culture so pervasive, right? Because people need to call their neighbors, people need to tell you to put on a mask. When you're in the airport, you need to have people that give you the weird looks, right? It's a cultural phenomena that needs to shift in order for us to kind of move past the 2020 hysteria. So, I'm sorry, what would you disagree with there?
Just read this small amount of water. So
yeah, you're good.
Basically, the left part, because while some like people on the left are certainly doing that, and some people on the left are authoritarian, there's a significant amount of leftists who are libertarian leftists who would disagree strongly, or like, at least if they support politicking, they're like the Jimmy Dores, who are willing to talk about their own vaccine injury and discuss like the ramifications of these policies qua like minority rights and shit.
Sure.
Like, the left isn't a monolith. And I just wanted to say that because like there are a significant amount of people in those circles pushing more reasonable like avenues, like Jimmy Dore, Savvy Sebs, Russell Brand, Joe Rogan.
Yes. A good point there, because here's the problem I get to is sometimes I'm like, oh, it's all the left. It's all the right. Even I fall on that thing. Oh, it's all the right wingers here. It's all the left. And you actually go out and you door knock, or you talk to people, or you go out in society, and I'm like, oh, there are still Democrats with NRA stickers, even though the NRA is useless. There's still Democrats who like guns. There are still Republicans who like weed. I know that's the joke. Oh, libertarians are just one of those too. But there are still leftists who are significantly anti-authoritarian and push for decentralization methods, specifically like Eric Weinstein's another one that you mentioned. I really like Jimmy Dore. Even though I don't agree with Jimmy Dore economically, I really, really agree with him on foreign policy. So I think, he's sometimes a breath of fresh air, even when people I watch regularly, I wish kind of would adopt those views. They don't. Last story I got is I find this amusing more than anything, but it's just ridiculous. I find it more ridiculous than anything, but kind of amusing. Is the U.S. government gets $7 million. How does Luke call it? A procedure that the establishment wants you to take as Fauci starts selling the product on TV. So yeah, Jeremy, I completely agree. central institutions have one figurehead. There's a bunch of people pulling strings in the back. In recent weeks, the U.S. government has quietly acquired a giant stash of these medical procedures for monkeypox, some 7 million doses since June. Bavarian Nordic, which possesses the only FDA-approved procedure, announced that on news on its website over the weekend. New order follows two previous orders from BARDA in June and July 2022 for 500,000 and 2.5 million doses, respectively, together with an order from BARDA in 2020 for 1.4 million doses, will bring the total deliveries in 2022 and 2023 to 7 million doses. That reads a statement released Friday from the pharmaceutical outfit. Quackwork Fraudgy is appearing on television next day to discuss his concerns. So it's just a revolving door of corporatism, but I don't know. I've debated, maybe they're going to try this again and people are going to fall for this again. I particularly not like to go through this again, even though with the scary beer flu, nothing too bad happened to me. But after I got locked up, I didn't necessarily follow the best health protocols. Maybe that's why I watched Liberty and Health. And I was at 29% body fat. Now I'm down to 20. I'm not really down for another lockdown, even though I don't think it would work. I think they might try it, or they might use this for another purpose. I just find this one interesting, and I kind of want to end the show on that note. It seems a revolving door BS still keeps going on, even though people know it's a show. I think they're just kind of like, hey, they know it's a show, but we're going to keep pulling the strings.
Well, I'm in my workout tank top right now. And fucking the primary thing that people need to know is that any sort of disease is going to be worse if you're not willing to live a healthy life on a normal basis. Yep. It's like neither of these things, anything that can be vaccinated can be gotten natural immunity to, if you're willing to work for it. And most people aren't. Most people, they were already doing lockdown life before the lockdown started. They were already sedentary. They love DoorDash and Uber Eats. They fucking they didn't go to a gym and they didn't work out from home even if they didn't go to a gym. They didn't go outside as much as they should. They would rather binge a TV show. The standard American diet, bringing them back to the grain trough for heavily subsidized grain. I wrote an article for Agorist Nexus, which we're coming out with a documentary soon. So keep an eye out for the crowdfunding campaign about the beer virus. Essentially, the whole thing of it is that the the common person has been raised in this system. One of the things I wanted to bring up from the last set of points was you want to talk why this is happening. It's because of the roots of the system. School. It's a Prussian system designed to teach indoctrination, teach informity, so that people are willing to run toward literal fucking gunfire for their government and put their life at risk, put their friends and families' lives at risk, in the pursuit of going along to get along, not rocking the boat, not getting in trouble, not getting referral, a suspension, an expulsion, and not just the negative reinforcements, but the literal Pavlovian aspect of it, of we're going to bong a bell, and that'll tell you when you're allowed to get your sugary treats at break, or when you're allowed to go get food, or when you're allowed to go outside like a good little doggy. And they're trained with this mentality. They get exhausted with carbs because that's what the school lunch system gives them. They get exhausted with PE from those carbs, and then they're burnt out. And this constant fatigue comes with a conformity thing where bullies are only a natural consequence of this, because of course they're going to have student conformity mechanisms along with teacher conformity mechanisms, which is why they will get you in trouble for fighting back. The whole thing is evil. The whole thing is wrong. and you're forced to be there, or Cop Mala is going to lock you up. So the whole fucking thing is designed to enforce conformity and get you thinking official sources are the only sources that I got to put on my papers. So that's the only thing that's right. That's the only thing that's fair. Anybody else is just a whack job, wingnut conspiracy theorist. So we can reject everything they have to say. And then that attitude translates out into a situation like this, where it's like, well, all these official sources that my teacher accepted, that I learned to think were the only right way to think, MSNBC, CNN, fucking all these things are just like brought to you by Pfizer. And they're all like on the same fucking bullshit of like, this is very dangerous to our democracy. And like, that's the loop. It's a feedback loop, and it creates a compliance structure to this system where people are doing what Ted K would call surrogate activities in order to maintain the machine while it builds their escape pods to space so that they can get the fuck out of here, or at least their bunkers so that they can survive the Georgia Guidestones, because they still want to do that. It's not like the rocks being gone doesn't mean they don't want to reduce the population to 500 million or less.
Well, one point
so
I made,
the whole thing is like built for this indoctrination, for this control, and for this group isolation. And so that's the root of it, is that we need to get rid of that, or people are going to continue with this like lockdown hysteria and continue saying, well, hey, these official sources told me to hunker down and eat junk food, so I'll do that.
Yeah, and well, what's funny about this whole monkeypox deal is that the patent for the vaccine was literally applied for or completed. I want to say, I have it up here on Google actually, September 24th of 2019.
Yeah, hey, imagine that.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like a self-licking ice cream cone. Now, my thing with this is that I don't know if they're really going to push for lockdowns or anything like that. Now, could they? Absolutely. But I feel like this isn't quite as tangible as COVID was, because everybody had got COVID pretty quick. But that being said, I did see a video this morning of people lining up to go get their monkeypox vaccine. So maybe we are in for the
still
pain.
going. It's the merry-go-round still going. So the hard part is this. I also have a problem. Where I'm like, I talk to libertarians mostly, mostly ANCAPs, minarchists. And then if I start going even outside, if you think of the political compass, even slightly outside of that, okay, there's classical liberals, maybe Republican, like libertarian Republicans, and then if I go outside that to the left, I really enjoy talking to Jeremy here, or people who say, okay, I'm a syndicalist, this, not Antifa, but actual people who are like, I'm on the left, I just don't agree. Okay, fine, not everybody's going to agree with ANCAP stand. But there are people out there who are still like, man, and there's a lot in big cities who are just like, man, follow the program. Keep doing the same thing. Like, what? There are people who ask me, like, oh, don't, Kareem, CNN said, I'm like, I don't watch them. I'll never watch them. So,
well, so on the CNN note, anybody who watched the Joe Rogan COOF coverage, like, they should know by now that CNN is a bunch of lying hacks. They made him bluer so that he would appear more sick. They wanted him gone, so they said that he took horse dewormer, and a bunch of other people did too. That was a lie. That was straight up a lie. He didn't take horse dewormer. He took human pills for humans. So the whole thing was designed to instate conformity, and that's why it doesn't matter that CNN is a pack of lying hacks. What mattered is that they were parroting the mainstream narrative. So all of that combines with the fact that, the thing is, they don't need another lockdown. They don't need it because they already got what they wanted. And the Great Reset is here now. And I wrote an article also for Agorist Nexus, in January 2021, talking about the article that I wrote in March 2020 had been proven completely true, that they were planning on building a fucking biometric ID and banking system where everything would be connected to a private blockchain that only the government could see. And all of this would create a mass conformity culture. it's not that the that the big pharma garbage was like extremely exclusive in that regard. It's that it was part of a bigger plan, and it was way to muscle it through. Like, they wanted everybody to say, "Ooh, give me contact free. Let's just go contact free. Everything will be fine as long as I don't have to touch anything. Now take away my cash so that I don't have to exchange it for anything and get all those germs on me. Scan my face and fuck my ass, Satan." Like, that's exactly what it is.
Nice.
Well, can I ask you a question? Why exactly do you think that is? Why do they want this sort of underlying monetary sort of social ID, universal currency, whatever you want to call it, or, you know, the central government, central banking digital currency? Why do you think they want this? Like, what?
Because then they won't need your permission. They won't have to answer questions like that. They won't. They can drop the pretense of democracy and just move into the straight fascism they've been pushing since they helped the Nazis escape from Germany.
Yep.
Do you think they're expecting pushback, or do you think they're going to be able to easily get away with this?
They're expecting pushback because they already read all the online chat rooms. They know who to go after. They're already starting to censor people. It doesn't, like, ultimately, it's going to be a very hard fought battle, but, you know, at least arming people with the information is good.
Yeah, and the main reason why they would like this central bank digital currency is because it's so much easier to deplatform and just completely deperson people. I mean, you look at somebody like Ryan Dawson, who's been telling the truth about what's been going on over in the Middle East for, 10 plus years. He's completely depersoned. He can't get on PayPal. He can't get on any of the main, Twitter, Facebook, you name it. He cannot go there. Well, what happens when that finally crosses over into just all digital currency? Guess what? Now, if they want, they can completely pull the plug on you, and you will have no way to buy or do anything until you're completely compliant with all their demands. And this goes back to, basically ESG, right? Environmental, social governance. They want to be able to have a score for every single individual. And if you do not meet this certain threshold, you will no longer be able to do what what daily functions look like to you in 2022, let alone 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, and also, like, I disagree with Ryan in some significant ways, but what I can say is the trucker protest, that got cut off.
Exactly.
The entire fucking country of Russia got cut off.
Exactly.
Like, they can just shut off a country. They can shut off you. So that's my thing that I tell people, is that they don't give a fuck about you, and it's not about freedom or safety or being there for the common person. It's about their bitch-ass little program that they can't run without all these fucking moving parts. They can't beat you up themselves, so they control you this way. It's evil. And that's the reason they want it, because this is the way people like that maintain control. They can't get it voluntarily, so they want to remove your ability to demand that they ask permission.
See, this is sort of where I don't know, I disagree a little bit. I agree with you that they're obviously they're going to try and take things by force, but the government and a lot of these sort of corporate globalist organizations that are attempting to, let's say, seize power, if that's how you want to put it, as soon as they see a little bit of pushback, they usually hop off for a second, right? With the lockdowns we saw in the UK, we saw in the United States, in certain states, right? As soon as they were getting an extraordinary amount of pushback on those lockdowns and on those policies, and people started to protest and people started to riot, people started to talk to their politicians, constituents started to get mad, they would pull back, right? And then after a while, once the storms calmed, once people forgot about it, once the protesting done, they incrementally sort of go back. And I also think, if it's like that famous quote, if all attempts to save ourselves was hopeless, there would be no need to have propaganda. There would be no need to censor, right? There's obviously a reason why they're censoring, right? Because all our attempts aren't futile. They need to censor. They need to control the narrative so they can brainwash people and psychologically manipulate people into doing things they normally wouldn't, had they have the information to make the free and honest choice. Now, obviously, there's people who are low IQ, who are dumb, and regardless of information, they're still going to make the same choice because they're stubborn, dumb, and politically ignorant for whatever reason. They don't necessarily have to have a low IQ, but they just not making the right choice for whatever reason. But most people genuinely have this perception of reality and think reality is one way, when in reality it's a completely different way, and they've been propagandized and manipulated. So I think that a large portion of their control is entirely reliant upon how strong a narrative is on a particular given day. And the way they keep that narrative is by buying off media companies, by having politicians to have these set sort of talking points, and buying off, working with corporations and advertisers and pharmaceutical companies. So I think, yes, some of the, like, for instance, like Klaus Schwab's pretty ballsy. He'll say on camera and admit it, that he's trying to infiltrate governments, and that he's, through the World Economic Forum, trying to basically make policy globally by pushing certain political candidates in nation states. But a lot of the politicians and a lot of these other people aren't so blunt and have to manipulate you through sort of soft talk and softening the language and just lying in general.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're good
Is
cop,
that the
bad
final
cop,
boss,
and they're
by the
all
way?
part of the same symptoms.
Yeah.
So, like, my take is obverse of yours. It has similar elements, but the opposite conclusion. And I said this, I've said this many times, but I tweeted this thing on September 5th last year. The problem is set points. There is a new baseline of control every moment, and sometimes they increase the control to intentionally insane levels. So people will cry out for the previous levels of control. The trick is to say no to all of their control except none of it. So that's the way I feel about it, and it sort of like goes for Kareem's benefit, and I think people who know him know why, but goes to the point of David Icke with his problem, reaction, solution, ordo ab chaos model, where he talked about how the Freemasons, the 33rd degree Master Masons, would discuss how these things can be done by creating a problem, having a pre-manufactured solution, so that when people react to it, they will call to you for a solution, and you can just say, yep, here, we got this. We got this thing for you. Now you can shut up and not rebel. It's sort of like that thing in V for Vendetta where the guy's like glowering in the camera. He's like, you have to remind them why they need us. That's it. That's all it is. It's not that they have to have the soft guy. For some people, it's that it's good cop, bad cop, but both cops are on the same team for the same purpose, and they're getting their confession either way. Because interrogation isn't a way to get confessions. It doesn't work. It's basically torture, and they can get somebody whittled down for so many hours that they'll just say, like, hey, I'll tell you anything. Just let me out of here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that doesn't work. And specifically the reason that you said. And yeah, the final boss, I would say actually, Jeremy, is the people who are pulling strings behind these governments. That is
the banksters and the industrial complexes.
Yeah, that is in effect the deep state until they're in control. And one thing I'll note, I want to get on, because maybe even Kyle's coworkers are saying like, "Oh, the red wave's coming," and I'm like, "Oh," and one day I just said, "Oh, the controlled opposition wave's coming," because I'm not gonna lie, every time, and I like Tim Pool, but every time I read a headline, it's like Republicans will overtake Democrats. I'm like, probably. Okay, fine. Statistically, probably. But to me, that's like not being excited about anything. It's like, hey, I still have, dog poop. But, I changed the box that's coming in. Like, it's still the same thing.
I don't like Tim Pool because his job is to read other people's job. He should get unique opinions and stop reading headlines. Anyway, go ahead.
I like Tim Pool a lot. My only problem is I feel when he has a guest on, he shifts more to like, oh, libertarian's cool. What's up, Dave Smith? Oh, hey, Jack's on. Oh, yeah, Trump.
He had the redheaded libertarian on. I don't respect his choice of guests at all. She sucks so much, asshole. She tried to cancel me and get me fucking like harassed off the internet. She tried to get a video about her that I made fucking removed from YouTube because I talked about her name. Look up the episode. It's very cringe. Like, but if I'm talking like YouTubers, I'm talking Truth Stream Media. That's a good YouTuber who actually gives a fuck. Or like for the leftists, Peter Coffin in very important documentaries. Like there are people who give a fuck, and they're not Tim Pool, who just does the like moderate mainstream shit and says no violence, nothing.
Well, Tim Pool wasn't the extent of my point. My point.
Yeah, I know. I just had to say that. Go ahead.
Fair enough. Like, whatever you think of Tim Pool, I like Tim Pool. You don't. But I do agree with Kyle. Like, more and more, he's going towards more just like, saying some Republican. But fine. Like, whatever. It's his show. I do like what he does a lot. My problem is a lot of people are like, red wave, red wave, red wave. I don't like it. The World Economic Forum's still there. The military-industrial complex is there. The pharmaceutical and all the special interests are still there. They're still bureaucrats.
And they've been there since Republican presidencies.
Yeah. And I even ask people, I'm like, all right, DeSantis is your man. Will he print more money? They're like, well, I'm like, yeah, that's a yes. Like, but you know,
Reed had.
I think a lot of that is also because of the nature of the culture war right now and how sort of that's taken up a lot of the sort of the political debate and a lot of the dialogue and discussion on like what's the major issues right now. Now, obviously, Americans above any cultural issues, the economy's first, right? That's what Americans care about most. But the culture war tends to sort of amplify itself and make it seem a lot, let's say, more imperative than it actually is. But in reality, the problem we have with the economy right now it's a multivariate problem, but the majority of that problem is a result of government intervention. Almost 99.9% of that is a problem of government intervention and the fact that the government has this absorbent amount of control over the market and the fact that it printed trillions upon trillions upon trillions upon trillions of dollars in such a short amount of time. And that's the reason why we have inflation, high prices. Now, there's supply chain issues as well. There's a lot of problems going on, but the point is like, the economy before all is the number one issue. And Tim Pool likes to talk a lot about the cultural issues. And I get it. Culture's important, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if let's talk about the transgender issue, right? Let's take this transgender issue. It's a major issue. There's stuff that me and you probably agree with, maybe disagree with a little bit. But if people can't afford to buy food, if people can't afford to go to the store, if people can't buy basic necessities, if people can't eat, if people can't feed their family, forget these cultural issues. They're not going to matter, and they won't matter because no one will have enough food in their stomach to fight for them because they'll be starved to death. So these
we have the apocalypse, but trans chick didn't swim, so we got victory.
Yeah,
exactly. These
the media will pick up on that, like, oh, hey, I know you can't afford to eat, but this celebrity identifies as this.
Yeah,
but it's the same with the Republicans and right wingers because they're the ones making the opposition, and like ultimately it doesn't matter. If this is and I say this about the sports issues specifically, and I think it crystallizes the whole thing. It's not your organization. It's not a women's space. It's a mega corporation doing mega corporate interests for profit. And if you really don't like it, then make trans exclusionary radical MMA or swimming or whatever it is, and stop complaining about this because it's not your space. It's a mega corporate space. They made it. They fund it. They control it. Shut the fuck up. It's the free market. Make some competition if you care about that so much. But they don't. They don't give a fuck about it. Not in the end. Not enough to put their own skin in the game. And they just rather talk about what's under somebody else's, you know? Mm-hmm. Because it's a jack-off issue that doesn't actually, like, matter. We need to talk about the looming social credit system. We need to talk about the economic issues. We need to talk about the fact that the U.S. has been hyper-funding Nazis in Ukraine. We need to talk about the fact that the U.S. has been hyper-funding genocide in Yemen and has been doing it in Israel, and now wants to give Ukraine an Iron Dome as well so that they can be just like Israel, but up there instead. And so, like, the whole thing is a big mishmash of things that they want you distracted by saying, hey, but look, somebody might be mean to somebody in a sports match. It doesn't matter. Ted K wrote a good example of all of this in his version of A Ship of Fools. Like, we're headed to an iceberg and the cabin boy is being told that, you know, whether or not the dog has been kicked matters more. Mm-hmm. It really fucking doesn't.
And I agree with you. It's like all really, really good points. It's actually a good note to end the show on. And what I'd say is this: until you can get out the bureaucrats, the special interests, and the intelligence agencies, nothing is going to change.
which are right-wing organizations. Like, this is a massive neoliberal and neoconservative joint effort to maintain the status quo.
Yes.
It's why they install Nazis. It's why the Galen org helped Nazis escape Germany.
Mm-hmm.
It's why they funded them in Ukraine. It's why the Mujahideen, a far-right theocratic organization, was funded by the CIA. It's why NATO was heavily staffed by Nazis and NASA. It's why all of these like far-right institutions get started in third world countries like Pinochet and Guaido and fucking all these fucking, like, they will install their shit wherever and call it free market through a jack-off organization like the Atlas Network.
Hey man, the CIA is now inclusive. They respect.
like Media Monarchy says, you know, pride flags on drone bombs.
Yeah, literally. That is where we're at. So guys, if you enjoyed this, you can check out Kyle at In Liberty and Health. You type in Kyle Matovcik in the search bar. He's interviewed some big libertarians, including Michael Heiss, Maj Toure, Reed Coverdale, and Ian Smith. They're some of my favorites, and a lot of other really good ones as well. You can also check out Jeremiah EXE, and check out his life story at jeremiahharding.com, where you can donate to him. And he has all of his IDs for Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, Dash, Ethereum, Litecoin, and Smart. And then last but not least, check out my co-host, Daniel Bitro, at thequantumeffect.org/shop, where you can get some really cool t-shirts like this Nikola Tesla one, Margaret Sanger, and a few other ones that I really like. The Joe Biden ones are really funny. The corrupt Hillary. Get some Jordan Peterson, some Alex Jones, because
you got to get one of Biden falling off his bike.
Yeah, I got to do that. That's a good idea.
We're working on it.
Or just up the stairs.
Yeah. We're just gonna Mises tea. And last but not least, if you want to help the cause of liberty, if you enjoyed this show, go to the lpmisescaucus.com. We're based in Austrian economics, pushing the needle forward towards freedom, keeping the ideals of Murray Rothbard alive, and the Ron Paul revolution. If you want to be a delegate, put in your first, last name, email address, phone number, and state. Click this button, and you're good to go. You can find me on the Essential Libertarians on YouTube. Just type in the Essential Libertarians. Thanks so much. We had some amazing guests. Jeremiah Harding, Insanity is Free. Kyle Matovcik, In Liberty and Health. And my co-host, Daniel Bitro. Guys, thanks for tuning in. I will catch you in the next one.